We got some actual football games to talk about. Finally, we have some real action. We had preseason games in full swing this weekend, and I'm going to break down my 10 biggest preseason fantasy takeaways, and we're going to get started right away. A reminder that usage is the most important stuff that we want to look at from the preseason. The most, informed takeaways we want to make are based on usage, followed by any injuries that happen. Thankfully, we didn't really experience any big ones this past weekend. And then who looks good, who looks bad is the thing that matters least of all of that stuff. So definitely something to keep in mind. We're going to start by sorting out some backfields because there's a lot of ambiguous backfields across the NFL. We're going to start with the ones that include rookie running backs. So a guy that was added into the fold at some point during the NFL draft. The first one that I want to look at here is the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. We've heard a lot of talk about Tank Bigsby working in to this backfield and, performing well in camp and that kind of thing. But when we look at the actual usage, Tank Bigsby played just one snap with the starters when Trevor Lawrence was in the game. However, it was a 3rd and 1. So keep in mind that might indicate that Tank Bigsby is going to be their short yardage back, which may impact Travis Etienne on the goal line. Something to monitor so far. I still do really like Travis Etienne in the late 3rd, early 4th round because he ran 4 of the 6 running back routes. He got most of the carries. He was the primary snap leader. The risk is baked in at that point in time that Tank Bigsby might be more involved than we think. But Tank Bigsby himself is also a great pick in the double-digit round. So I actually do like both of these guys. Something to monitor going forward in the preseason. Going to the Bears, another ambiguous backfield. There is a rookie there with Roschon Johnson, but as of now, Khalil Herbert is the lead back. Something to monitor for sure is the usage of Roschon Johnson because he had a great run. He looked really good in the game, but he was 4th on the depth chart. So something that we definitely need to make sure we're factoring in is that Khalil Herbert is going to be the lead back at least to start the season. If you guys are in managed redraft leagues, getting guys that get out to good starts is really important because they have a bunch of trade value early on in the season. And if Khalil Herbert's the main running back, then there's a good chance that you could use him in a tier up to a better running back, and that makes him a better redraft pick than he would be, like, let's say, a best ball pick. I really love Roschon Johnson in best ball leagues because he could scale his production as the season goes along. Then we get to the Dolphins backfield where Devon Achane was not really making any noise. Despite Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson not even playing in this game, Devon Achane is technically like 5th on this running back depth chart if you include those guys. He had some plays. He looked good as a pass catcher, but as far as his role is concerned, which is the thing that we need to be most concerned with, it is not looking good for Devon Achane so far in the preseason game. So let's move on to the Cowboys backfield where Tony Pollard was given the night off. So he's obviously the starter. Malik Davis played most of the snaps with the starters, but I was really impressed with what Deuce Vaughn showed. He is the guy that in best ball leagues I'm going to take a shot on as the RB2. If you guys are taking shots on handcuffs, early down guys, it looks like Malik Davis will be that guy. So he is the one that is the primary handcuff, but I do think Deuce Vaughn could work himself into this offense on special teams as a receiving back, and that's why I kind of like him from a best ball standpoint, but not a whole lot to take away from that backfield. Then we get into takeaway number 2, which is backfields, ambiguous backfields that don't have any rookies. So the Philadelphia Eagles backfield is a mess right now because Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott were given the night off. They didn't end up playing in the preseason week 1 game. DeAndre Swift started the game. It looked like he was the primary back. He looked the best of the two. Rashad Penny also got some work into the second quarter as well. I'd be wary of drafting a ton of Rashad Penny at his current cost right now. I've drafted a lot of him when he was more of like 11th, 12th round pick, but he has snuck up in ADP right now. And to be honest, he's no lock to make the team. It looks like they do really like Swift. It looks like they do like, Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. So this could be a big-time mess of a backfield. I would say from a best ball perspective, I'm taking shots on them because we don't have to choose when to start these guys. But in season-long leagues, I'm pretty wary of this backfield. I'm not sure we're going to ever have a consistent, week-to-week starter over the course of the entire season. But I will take shots in best ball formats, like I said. The Bills backfield, there wasn't too much to take away because James Cook was the primary back. He looked really good. I will say that, and that's somebody that I'm becoming more interested in. But Damian Harris was out with an injury for this game, so there's not a lot to take away from a usage standpoint for the Buffalo Bills backfield. Continue to monitor that into next week's preseason games. The Kansas City Chiefs backfield, also not a ton to take away because Isaiah Pacheco is out and he's dealing with, his hand injury and all the other stuff that he's dealing with. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, though, did start over Jerick McKinnon. And Jerick McKinnon is the guy that's going second off the board in underdog drafts and most ADP sites right now. But it does look like if Isaiah Pacheco were to miss time, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire would work into the primary ball carrier role and Jerick McKinnon's role would remain unchanged, regardless of injury It looks like he's going to be the pass-catching back primarily. So that's something definitely to monitor. If you guys are not believers in Isaiah Pacheco, you should probably be stocking up on your Clyde Edwards-Helaire snaps because he probably will be the primary backup. Then we get into the Pittsburgh Steelers backfield where Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren did split snaps with the starters. And I put this into a fantasy news TikTok / YouTube short, and a lot of people got all mad about this. I wasn't saying that, I think Jaylen Warren is going to start over Najee Harris. What I was saying is Najee Harris's draw, and the reason that we were drafting him for the last 2 years, is this massive workload. But if he's not going to get a massive workload, he's a mid RB2 at best, because we know that Najee Harris is not the most talented running back in the league. We know that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not the best offense in the league. They don't have the best offensive line in the league. And if Jaylen Warren is going to siphon away 30, 40, potentially 50% of the overall work in this backfield, it's going to result in Najee Harris being an absolutely horrid fantasy pick. So I probably am steering clear of Najee Harris anytime before like the 4th round area. On Underdog, he slides a little bit, but in home league ADP sites, he's going in like the 2nd or 3rd round, and I cannot get on board with him at that point in time. Then we get over to the Washington backfield where Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson basically split work evenly down the middle, which is kind of what we should have been expecting. Brian Robinson works on the early down, role, and he gets most of the carries, and then Antonio Gibson's going to be the guy that gets most of the receiving work, gets most of the 3rd down work, obvious pass catching situations, and things of that nature. I like both of those guys at their current cost right now. I think Brian Robinson, going towards the double-digit rounds, Antonio Gibson going towards the double-digit rounds. Both guys are good bets, especially in best ball when you don't need to choose when to start them. So number 3 takeaway is some wide receiver usage, some things that we want to take away from the wide receiver position. Nathaniel Tank Dell of the Houston Texans played all the way back on Thursday, played the most snaps with the starters, which I think was really, really encouraging to see because Nico Collins played and John Mechie played. So the fact that Tank Dell played the most snaps, ran the most routes with the starters is really, really crazy for a 3rd-round rookie receiver to be the starter this early. He also made a nice catch in the end zone. It's worth noting that Robert Woods wasn't playing, but Robert Woods is kind of dust at this point in his career. I think Tank Dell is somebody that you really need to have on your sleeper radar, given the usage that we saw in preseason week 1. Hopefully that continues going forward because the Texans really do need somebody to step up in that receiver core. There's nobody really that's established there. Nico Collins is the guy that's going the highest, but it's possible that Tank Dell starts to rise up boards at this point in time. Jaden Reed of the Green Bay Packers was the 3rd wide receiver, starting slot receiver there behind Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs on the outside. He played as the starting slot guy. Definitely a good best ball pick and a good deep sleeper as a 3rd-round rookie receiver in the NFL draft that I really did think had some pretty good film and separated well according to reception perception. So keep Jaden Reed in the back of your mind late in the drafts as well. Carolina Panthers, Jonathan Mingo played a lot with the starters as well, but DJ Chark was off the field after the first drive. DJ Chark would be my best shot in best ball if you guys are looking for a Panthers wide receiver to stack up with Bryce Young, because it looks like his role is the most secure. He's going to be a starting outside wide receiver. He has big play upside. But if you're playing in more managed leagues, DJ Chark doesn't really have a ton of upside in a season-long perspective. Jonathan Mingo is probably the guy that I would take in season-long home leagues late in your drafts as well. Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars played on the outside a lot last year, but with Calvin Ridley coming in, it looks like Christian Kirk was relegated to slot usage. Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones were the outside guys, and Christian Kirk was the slot guy, and he received 89% of the overall 12 personnel, so 2 wide receiver snaps last year, but that could be in jeopardy with Calvin Ridley now coming in. He might be relegated completely to a slot receiver, which would hurt his overall upside, and he's a guy that's going right now in the 5th, 6th round of underdog drafts, 7th round or so of home league drafts, so definitely keep that in mind when you're drafting Christian Kirk. Corey Davis also swapped in at the X receiver position for the New York Jets. Garrett Wilson was given the night off. So it looks like for me that Corey Davis is the primary X receiver backup, and that means that Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, and Mecole Hardman will be the main 3 wide receiver rotation there for the New York Jets. So if you guys are drafting some Jets wide receivers, hoping that you can get Aaron Rodgers as number 2, I think the leader in the clubhouse is probably Allen Lazard. If not, Mecole Hardman, and all those guys are good best ball stacking options with him as well. Takeaway number 4, we get to the young quarterbacks, right? There was a lot of young quarterbacks on the field. From the rookie quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Young, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, they all got some run this week in the preseason. Then we also got to see, Trey Lance and Jordan Love and Sam Howell and Kenny Pickett, guys that don't have a lot of starting experience under their belt. So with these guys, I'm more inclined to look into like how they're looking, how decisive they are. Are they, getting rid of the ball quickly? Are they running? That kind of thing. Trey Lance looked like he was lost for a lot of his play with the San Francisco 49ers, and I have no doubt in my mind that he has no business starting for this team. If Brock Purdy's healthy, he's going to play. And honestly, I think that if Brock Purdy's out, I think that Sam Darnold might even have a close to a leg up on Trey Lance, even though he started the game. They're trying to get him some reps. He's definitely inexperienced, but I just don't think he fits this offense very well. And there's also been some reports that they've been trying to shop him this entire time. Either way, it looks like Brock Purdy over Trey Lance, at least in my opinion, is probably a take that's going to age very well. Then we get into some of the rookie quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, he looked really indecisive. He threw a bad interception on Thursday, but he's a rookie quarterback. It was his first preseason game. I'm not going to read too much into that. Same goes for Anthony Richardson, who struggled with accuracy. He missed some easy throws here and there, and that definitely showed up, obviously, on his college tape, and it showed up so far in the preseason. But again, I'm not overly concerned with Anthony Richardson struggling with accuracy. We did see him use his legs a little bit, which is something that I definitely want to see more of in the regular season. Bryce Young, of the three, top rookie quarterbacks, absolutely looked the best of these guys. He looked like he had the most decisiveness. He looked, the most accurate, that kind of thing. And that's something also that I expected to see because Bryce Young was the most pro-ready of these guys. So definitely encouraging to see for the Carolina Panthers offense. If you guys are high on Miles Sanders, if you're high on Jonathan Mingo or whatever, it looks like Bryce Young might get out to a pretty decent start to his NFL career. Then we get into some of these other guys that, haven't started a lot of games. Jordan Love struggled with accuracy a little bit, but overall, the Packers offense I was quite impressed with. It looked like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, all these guys, A.J. Dillon were able to make some plays, and that bodes well for Jordan Love's development. Sam Howell got sacked a few times for the Washington Commanders, and he kind of looked indecisive on that first drive for the Commanders, but he did make some plays with his legs, with his arm. And then Kenny Pickett also looked quite sharp for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Deshaun Watson, because he's, not played very much in the last couple of years, he looked like he was getting back to his old self as well. Some of the top 12 tight ends might be in some trouble, and I think this was the biggest micro player takeaway that we could take away from this preseason week one. Pat Freiermuth might be in more of a tight end committee than we thought. He actually ended up splitting snaps with rookie tight end Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington, for what it's worth, was blocking on some of those snaps, and Pat Freiermuth did run 5 of the overall 7 routes for the offense, but it is worth noting because Pat Freiermuth definitely needs elite route participation to hit big this year because the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, we don't expect them to be a massively improved offense. I think Kenny Pickett looked good, but I don't think they're going to be suddenly a top 10 offense in the NFL. So if Pat Freiermuth is not out there running as many routes as possible, then it's possible that he's probably going to be a back-end tight end 1, and that's probably not the type of guy that you want to draft. You want to draft a guy with a higher ceiling than that, and I thought that Pat Freiermuth's high target share, high route participation would be an asset to his upside case to be a top 5 tight end in a breakout scenario this season, but definitely we want to monitor that going forward in the preseason. Greg Dulcich is probably the biggest loser of all of the preseason games so far, because last year, we saw him come on the field and beat out straight up Alberto right away, command a high route participation even as a rookie tight end. But we got to remember that Sean Payton did not draft Greg Dulcich. And in fact, he did draft Adam Troutman, who's another tight end on the roster there in Denver. And Adam Troutman outsnapped Greg Dulcich 15-10. He ran 9 routes to Greg Dulcich's 7. And like I said, if Sean Payton is going to favor Adam Troutman because he knows him, he fits his offense, whatever the case is, that's going to be bad for Greg Dulcich. Even though I think Greg Dulcich is a much better tight end than Adam Troutman, it could result in Greg Dulcich not being the main tight end at least early on in the season. And that's a guy that I probably don't want to draft because if he's not the main tight end early on in the season, he'll probably be on waiver wires by week 3. And you can go and pick him up at that point in time. So a guy that I really need to cool down my usage of, we're going to Buffalo on Wednesday to get in the remaining entries for our Best Ball Mania 4 drafts. And I have a lot of Greg Dulcich. He's my highest roster tight end. So I definitely want to cool down on that. And if you guys want to get on Underdog right now, promo code FSE will match your first deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $10, you get $20 on the site to play with. And as a free gift for using our promo code, you can get our redraft draft guide, the Redraft Rankings Manifesto 2.0, with our rankings and so much more value packed into that for free by using our Underdog promo code. And it's linked down below in the pinned comment if you want to check that out. And if you already have an Underdog account, you can get our draft guide on flockfantasy.com and use promo code FSE over there as well. So takeaway number 6 is also at the tight end position, because we did see, like those two losers of the tight end usage, we did see some winners emerge at the tight end position, resulting in some good sleepers here. Sam Laporta, the Detroit Lions second-round pick tight end, played all of the snaps with the starters, and the Lions weren't really resting anyone, sans Amon-Ra St. Brown and David Montgomery, so that's definitely crucial, especially at that position, that Sam Laporta was the main guy. He's becoming one of my favorite sleepers in an offense that really doesn't have a ton going on outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown and the running backs, at least for the first 6 games of the season until Jameson Williams comes back. So Sam Laporta, a guy that I think you need to have on your radar as a good sleeper. Then we go to the Dallas Cowboys, where Jake Ferguson pretty much completely took over the Dalton Schultz role. They pretty much rested everybody, so I wouldn't take away too much from the Dallas Cowboys. And even in a best-case scenario, Jake Ferguson is probably going to work behind CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks, and probably Tony Pollard in the passing game as well. So he's probably not a guy that I'm overly excited about. But when it comes to drafting on Underdog, if you're drafting a Cowboys stack, I think Jake Ferguson is the tight end that you want to pair up with Dak Prescott or whatever the case is. So definitely keep an eye on him. Luke Musgrave, also of the Green Bay Packers, second-round pick for them. We've heard that he's going to be like an every-down tight end option for them, and he pretty much was. If you guys look at the usage there, I wouldn't make any rash conclusions because, like I said, I really did prefer Tucker Kraft pre-draft, and he did play some snaps with the starters, and he ran some routes as well. But still, I think Luke Musgrave is the tight end to own, at least from a redraft perspective, and he's a good sleeper in deeper leagues, but we'll have to monitor if Tucker Kraft eats into his usage even more. Takeaway number 7, let's sort out some handcuffs, right? We know who the starters are in these backfields, but we definitely want to know who's behind them, right? If anything happens to Derrick Henry, if anything happens to Josh Jacobs, who are the starters behind them? We got some clarity in regards to that. Tajay Spears looked the most dynamic and the most explosive between he and Hassan Haskins in the Titans backfield. Should anything happen to Derrick Henry, we definitely want Tajay Spears, in my opinion. He touched the ball 7 times, and he made a couple nice cuts, made a couple nice plays, and he was a good prospect, a third-round pick that probably could have gone higher in the NFL draft had he not had like a bunch of ACL red flags, pre-draft at the combine. So definitely keep an eye on Tajay Spears. He's somebody that should work his way into the backfield a little bit, but probably has the most inherent value if Derrick Henry were to go down with an injury, which is increasingly possible because he's 29 years old and he has 1,900 career touches under his belt. So Tajay Spears, keep an eye on him. Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings played the most snaps with the starters with Alexander Mattison out. So it looks like he is going to be the primary backup for Alexander Mattison, but I still do like Dwayne McBride as a deep sleeper as the season goes along. Michael Carter looked the most impressive of the Jets backup running backs with no Dalvin Cook or anybody signed there in New York. I think the reason for that is twofold. Number one, Breece Hall is probably progressing well in his ACL rehab. And number two, I think the Jets trust Michael Carter. They trust Donovan Knight to be able to work into the backfield if Breece Hall, misses a couple games here and there, or maybe they have to work him into the backfield a little bit more early on in the season. So Michael Carter, a guy that I think is a decent deep sleeper in best ball or late deep leagues as well. Zamir White, clear-cut handcuff for Josh Jacobs. He played 20 of the 23 starter snaps. If anything happens to Jacobs, if Jacobs holds out, if he gets injured, whatever the case is, it looks like Zamir White's going to be the guy. Josh Kelly of the Los Angeles Chargers played the most running back snaps, 11 out of 16, but Isaiah Spiller looked the best, in my opinion. He busted a long run off. I still think that Isaiah Spiller can be the handcuff for Austin Eckler. I did like him coming out of college last year. I am taking shots on both of those backs in best ball because, Austin Eckler's older. He could deal with injury at some point, and one of those guys will probably end up becoming valuable. My money is on Spiller, but the recent usage says that Josh Kelly will probably get the first crack at that job. So number 8, takeaway is the first-round rookie wide receivers. Let's check in with those guys. Jordan Addison played as the starting wide receiver in the Vikings preseason games. Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne were given the night off. So at least we have Jordan Addison working as the wide receiver 3, which is really important. I think he'll end up being the wide receiver 2 in terms of overall usage and routes, but it definitely is worth noting that he's already at least the wide receiver 3, which is good news for him. He also made an excellent catch on the sideline too. He made like a toe tap catch. Looked the most impressive from like an on-field play, eye test perspective of the rookie wide receivers, and I think he's solidifying himself for me as a firm like 6th, 7th round value in both managed and best ball formats. Jackson Smith and Jigba played primarily in the slot for the Seattle Seahawks, even though Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf got the night off. So in my opinion, it's unlikely that JSN is going to pay off at his high ADP until late in the season. So if you're drafting JSN in like the 4th, 5th, 6th round of underdog drafts, you are making that statement basically knowing that he probably will not be great early in the season because he's going to have to work through playing only in 11 personnel and that kind of thing. So for me, for JSN and managed leagues, if you guys are just doing home league drafts, I would probably not draft him until like round 7 or later, because you don't want him to be, your wide receiver 2 or your wide receiver 3 or even your wide receiver 4 potentially on your roster. You want him to be an upside swing, a guy that can get better as the season goes along. And I think early on in the season, he's probably not going to outsnap DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, and I would put good money that he doesn't do that. Quentin Johnston and Zay Flowers, the other 2 first-round wide receivers here, they didn't have much to take away because Quentin Johnston had Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Josh Palmer all not playing. So as of now, it looks like he's 4th on the depth chart, but he did, look okay. He had a couple plays. He had a couple drops as well, which may concern some people. But overall, I was pretty impressed with Quentin Johnston. He was beating some coverages and making some things happen after the catch. Zay Flowers didn't really do a ton. Rashad Bateman and OBJ were both out. So nothing really to take away there from the Baltimore Ravens. We'll have to see what happens next week. So takeaway number 9 is I'm just going to go rapid fire observation-wise who I thought looked good. And again, this is the least important of all the preseason stuff that I've talked about so far. The usage is definitely more important than this. But I will say, I did watch all of the games. I went through and watched the condensed games of all of them. So the teams and the players that I thought looked really good. The Steelers' offense really impressed me. I thought, Kenny Pickett looked decisive. Deontay Johnson looked really good, commanding targets. George Pickens had a nice touchdown as well. And the Bucs did have some of their starting defense out there. So I was really impressed with the Steelers' offense. As I alluded to earlier, Deshaun Watson looked more like himself. The Browns' offense looked a little bit more exciting. And Elijah Moore was actually really cooking prior to him getting injured. And that injury didn't sound too serious, so I wouldn't be too concerned with that. The Bears' offense, DJ Moore broke off like a 62-yard screen pass touchdown. Khalil Herbert also broke off a long touchdown as well. Justin Fields looked decisive. He looked a little bit better than he did as a passer last year, although most of the passes that he completed were kind of shorter stuff. But definitely good news for the Bears offense. The Green Bay Packers offense, like I said, impressed me a little bit. I didn't know what to expect from Jordan Love. He had a couple miscues, a couple missed throws here and there, but overall it looked like Christian Watson might take a step forward this year. It looked like Romeo Doubs might take a step forward this year. Jaden Reed looks like a good sleeper wide receiver. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones both looked good in that game. Luke Musgrave looks like he's going to be the starting tight end and looks like he can contribute. So the Packers offense, a lot more talent maybe than meets the eye for the casual fantasy fan. Jordan Addison, like I said, he looked the best of all of the first-round wide receivers. He looked like he belongs in the NFL and looks like he can be an early contributor in fantasy as well. Potentially this year's Chris Olave or somebody like that. So keep an eye on Jordan Addison. Second-year wide receivers primed for breakout candidates, man. Christian Watson looked really good. I thought he looked incredible in the game, in the Green Bay Packers game. Jahan Dotson also looked really good for the Commanders, and George Pickens as well. Those guys are all going to be good breakout candidates for those of you guys are picking in the mid-rounds. Tajay Spears and Roschon Johnson stood out as the best rookie running backs, just the guys that looked the best on the field. Of course, Bijan and Gibbs didn't play a ton. So take that with a grain of salt. I thought the Saints veterans as well. The Saints offense looked pretty good, particularly Derek Carr looked good. Alvin Kamara looked good, and Michael Thomas looked healthy, which is something that we haven't been able to say for a couple of years now. Michael Thomas could end up being a pretty big value late in drafts, because I do think if he's healthy, Derek Carr will actually, spread out the ball pretty well, and it won't just be Chris Olave getting a 30% target share. I could see Michael Thomas carving out a decent target share as well. And then the final takeaway of this video is sometimes not playing at all is the right answer. Sometimes we don't want to see these guys play at all. It's a good indicator of usage, and I will say, Bijan Robinson not playing, Tyler Algier not playing. Looks like those guys are going to be the top guys. We'll have to see what happens in week 2 of the preseason. Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, as I mentioned, both got the night off for the Miami Dolphins, which indicates to me that those guys early on in the season are going to be huge, huge values late in drafts. They're going pretty much undrafted, top 12 rounds or later is when you're going to get the Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson kind of duo there, and I love those guys in best ball, so definitely take your shots on them. Devon Achane is the season-long bet. Like, if you're taking him in a best ball tournament, it makes sense. You can get better production as the season goes along, but I'm probably avoiding Devon Achane in traditional season-long because I do think those guys are going to end up being the early in the season guys that you want. Dameon Pierce also did not play at all, which is a good indicator because Devin Singletary did play, and he played most of the backup snaps, so it looks like he's going to be the handcuff to Dameon Pierce. But Dameon Pierce is the clear lead back, which was not a guarantee because the coaching staff did change. We didn't know if they were going to use him the same way that Lovie Smith did last year. Cam Akers and Kyron Williams both did not play for the Rams. It looks like they will be the starting 2 backs there. Josh Palmer, like I said, was given the night off, suggesting that he's probably ahead of Quentin Johnston on the pecking order right now. So if you're drafting Quentin Johnston, make sure it's like in the 8th, 9th round or later, because he might not be a starting receiver early on in the season, more of a stash. And then the Eagles' backfield, like I said, is a bit of a headache take right now. Knowing that Kenny Gainwell and Boston Scott had the night off is concerning, but you could make the argument that they may have had the night off because they already know the system. DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny were offseason acquisitions. Maybe they were getting on the field. But right now, ADP would suggest that's concerning because DeAndre Swift is going off the board as the first running back from that backfield. Rashad Penny is the second, and then Kenny Gainwell is the third, even though there's been reports that he looks like the best running back there, and he was given the night off of the veteran running backs there. So that is the end of the video. Hopefully you guys got some value from it. If you did, leave a like. You guys have been showing a ton of support on the channel. Really appreciate it. Subscribe if this is the first time you are checking us out, and leave any of your comments. Who was your biggest winner of the preseason? Who was your biggest loser of the preseason down below? And if you guys want to dominate your drafts this year, if you want to win your league, check out our draft guide. The best way you can get it is by depositing $10 on Underdog Fantasy. You will get it for free with a minimum $10 deposit by using promo code FSE when you sign up and deposit. If you already have an Underdog account or if you're in an eligible state for Underdog Fantasy, you can also get it on our website, flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE over there as well for 30% off. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out in the link in the description. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.